I would love there to be a time, in the not too distant future where people just go, well, of course, there are athletes from East Africa in this game. What would cycling be without it? And what would cycling be without, the riders from Colombia and Ecuador? And what would it be without, sprinters from, Australia or Japan? Whatever it is, or wherever they come from, I want that to be the norm. And I think it's just a matter of time. And I think we are the tip of the spear. I'd like for us to be the tip of the spear, but I want everyone else to come through once the door is pried open. So yeah, that's what success looks like for us. We think cycling is a beautiful sport, and I think it can enrich cultures and communities, and I think it can have multiple expressions and expressions we can't even anticipate. And that's the thing that I'm really excited about, right? Like, what does it look like? A full expression of cycling in Kenya? What does it look like in Ethiopia or Eritrea or Rwanda, Uganda?
Welcome to another episode of The Ride to Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to a more productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. My name is Pedro Couto Lopes. You can find me on LinkedIn under my own name. And in this podcast, I explore cycling's global trends, community needs, innovative business strategies, and the journeys of remarkable individuals in the world of cycling. Today, we have two guests who are not just part of the cycling world, but they are reshaping it. Mikel Grande, an international criminal lawyer, and Tsgabu, Ethiopia's first Tour de France rider, are here to talk about Team Amani, a movement and project that is breaking down barriers, creating opportunities, and proving that talent exists far beyond traditional cycling strongholds. In this episode, you will hear how Tsgabu's journey from Ethiopia to the elite European peloton shaped his vision, and how Mikel's experience tackling global justice fuels his relentless pursuit of fairness in cycling. From launching a UCI continental team to supporting a race circuit in Africa, their work is changing the future and the faces of cycling. But this isn't just about cycling. It's about opportunity, access, and rewriting the rules of who gets to compete on the world stage. But before we get into the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you listen, please consider sharing with your friends, with your network, give the podcast a follow, leave us a review, because it helps us to grow the podcast and continue to bring you amazing guests that inspire us and take us on a learning journey together. So get ready for an inspiring conversation. Now, back to the podcast. Welcome Tsgabu and Mikel to Ride to Success. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I wanted to start by mentioning a saying that I think is quite poignant in this conversation, which is, if the mountain doesn't come to Muhammad, then Muhammad must come to the mountain. And I think this saying paints broad brushstrokes to what you're doing, to the project that you're doing. And, really before starting and going to the questions that I have loads of questions about the work you've been doing. I want to I have had a podcast guest come and tell me that in the next 10 years, the Tour de France will be won by an athlete coming from Africa. What is for you the steps that are taking place for this to happen?
Well, that's a really big question. And I guess we're going to get at it through the course of this podcast. But maybe we'll start by just saying that for us, the major ambition is that in 10 years' time, there are pathways for people outside of Europe to compete in this sport, and that their competition in cycling is normalized. That's kind of ultimately where we're trying to go. Obviously, our focus is on athletes from Africa, but that doesn't mean that our cause shouldn't be shared by those who are in other regions as well, right? What we're trying to ultimately do, what Tsgabu and I care the most about, is we love this sport, and we'd like to see it to be something bigger than just a regional endeavor. We think it should be an international sport, and for that to take place, it has to be accessible for people outside of Europe.
Of course, yeah. And specifically with the cycling being so Eurocentric, brands structure need to be put in place from brand perspective, from corporations, from investment to invest in Africa, invest in East Africa, so that the pathways are opened and equalized. So, the hidden steps that an athlete or a potential athlete being born in East Africa doesn't necessarily see, but exists. And for those barriers to be removed, then there needs to be investment. There needs to be projects like the ones you are doing that create that pathway towards major competitions, hosting your own events, so that it gives them the platform and gives them the kind of the blueprint, if you will, to have that the go from A to B, and that it will be to be a clear path to success in that regard. And I wanted to kind of delve a bit about your stories, and let's start with Tsgabu. You have been a pro athlete within the world tour. You've been racing for over 12 years. I think you've spoken at length about your experience, but what I'm more interested here is what's kind of the most unexpected lessons that you have learned about the sport, about cycling, that most fans, myself, don't see when you're watching a bike race.
The biggest thing is for me is what I was a little bit the challenge at the beginning, and I learned out of it. It's the adaptation to different culture, different language. I wasn't really good speaking English, and all these things, small things, added up, and you lose on the way. Also, there's so many things and so many benefits. Like for me, I get always better when I start speaking good English, then you start asking and understand and all this coach point, all these things. And I think also the cultural shift, I was really, really good, I would say, on myself with my age, shifting like my head. When I jump to the plane, I always try to shift, forget what is my culture, my mentality in Ethiopia, stay behind and try to adapt. Have that different mentality, because I was the only Ethiopian kid flying just to Europe, racing with someone else, sitting at the table in dinner, racing, race tactic, and all these things. I was never had someone like me in the table. Everything was outside. So those things was, I think, a bit outside of riding a bike, and the adaptation was big. I think that people doesn't see it, maybe because people see us only that see. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you said about it. It puts in stark contrast what you just said about having to kind of, when you stepped out of the plane traveling to Europe to race, you had to forget what, in your words, forget that a bit of your culture, and that speaks tons in terms of the cultural shift that you needed to adapt to be able to race in Europe. And I think it speaks as well of the fact that it's a different system. There is maybe barriers put in place that it's not quite clear at the onset, or it is, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. But it creates already a dynamic where you are having to kind of relearn kind of what might be basic things about day-to-day life, interactions, cultural shifts. All of that needs to be kind of relearned. Just touching a bit, just so that I give a bit more context to what I'm saying, is that I'm originally from Portugal. I've been living in UK for 15 years. I mean, that is nothing to compare to kind of the transition that having to coming from Ethiopia to race in Europe, but it presents already as in itself already a cultural shift, because you need to adapt to a different society, to different norms. What is kind of, has there been, what was the kind of something that you learned that has always stuck in your head as something that I wasn't, this is not something that I would be expecting to have to learn again, and but you're confronted with that reality once you're racing in Europe?
I mean, there's so many things like you learn on the way. I mean, it's there's always new things for me. There's always like first time, because there was no one before me that could tell me like don't do this, don't do this. Sorry, sorry.
It's okay.
So it was always first time. So I was always learning from one mistake and like just write it down. And I don't want to do it this because this was the biggest lesson for me. And if I did it, it was my mistake. And those kind of rules that I had just to adapt, like what he said. And but yeah, in general, for me, it's all that, and that's also the beautiful thing that I always like what I learned during my journey and what I try to achieve and to do for myself with Michael to with Amani. This is things like when we have this long term that I try to, it's actually getting better, because for me, I was the only one to adapt myself to change the culture and everything. But with Team Amani, if I was there, like Team Amani was there, like I will not have that problem, right? Because I will have many athletes like me, they speak the same language. So the adaptation is less stress. You just focus on the performance. So it's like those was always I connected it what I could do also in the future, which is like makes it easier and better. So it's for me, it's like I said, I had this rule that one mistake, that's learning point. The second one, it's my mistake, or I go to the next step. So it was all those about those things for me.
Very good. And Mikel, I'm kind of interested in your journey as well. You know, as an international criminal lawyer, part of your job, part of your day-to-day role is solving complex global issues. And I'm kind of interested in, you know, how your background has shaped your approach to breaking down barriers in cycling and removing these hidden steps through your experience, through building Team Amani project.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the first lesson is kind of that despite how ambitious, you know, Amani's goals are, and I've heard on more than a few occasions of people thinking that, you know, making cycling more international is an intractable problem. Believe me, in my day-to-day job, I know what intractable problems are, and this is not one of them. Cycling is a small sport. It's a small space. I'm often in rooms with people in the sport who, if they just so decided, could change everything in that meeting, right? So, yeah, I think on one level it's a nice leveler, because it's almost a yin and yang situation for me, where you know, the day-to-day, you know, suffering and things that I encounter in my day job, and then all the hope and promise that I encounter working in Amani. It's a reminder of how things are in the real world, and the little space that we may occupy. What are the things that we can actually change? And I think, and I think cycling is one of them. I believe it fully. Like, you know, if we can get the right coalition together of people who can see their own personal interests in a larger story here about making the sport more international, then we can achieve it. And not in 10, 20 years, we can achieve it, you know, relatively quickly. And that's really what we're trying to do.
And I would have, building on that, because you know, in some regard, kind of you are trailblazers in your own right. In both Tsgabu and Mikel, you both have that kind of trajectory that is perhaps, is, well, as far as I know, there's not been done before. I mean, you mentioned, Mikel, about, you know, there is, the people have the power, but maybe what is lacking is the willingness to activate those changes, and you are at the forefront of creating the meaningful action to get those changes done. What is perhaps one misconception that people have about your work, about Team Amani, that people understood a bit more?
I'll kick this one off. For me, it's that somehow it's motivated by some sort of charitable impulse. That's a misconception. It absolutely isn't. I don't think that the people that I've worked with my entire career need any charity. They are people who have obvious talent, and just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it isn't there. And so, for me, it's just a matter of fairness on one side, and a selfish interest, which is I love this sport, and I think it could be so much more if the rest of the world were able to play. And this just happens to be where I work in the area of the world that I know. And it just so happens that I've come into contact with some of the most amazing people in my life, like Tsgabu. And we just are joining forces, and we're inviting others to do the same. And if we succeed in this space, if we succeed with this team and this project, I think the implications for the sport across the rest of the planet are significant. That's the misconception I'd like to tackle. This isn't a charity.
Very good. I mean, Tsgabu, do you have anything to add to that, or do you resonate with what Mikel just said?
Yeah, I mean, it's like what I say. We have always a conversation each other about this and what we want to do and everything, and why we're doing what we're doing. It's like you mentioned a little bit, like what makes it special. This team in that never happened before is I want to just a little bit add to there is like I really believe in this. What this gives me so much energy. Why I'm involving in the project that to achieve in the future is people see only few Africans that make it to the top, and people think those are only specials, and those are the ones only. People think, and you could guess it like, okay, maybe there's also more coming, but how many more people doesn't know. But this is what I feel and what I see and what I think is, if there was more opportunity, more doors open for more Africans, especially from East Africa, we would have seen so many Africans. We would have seen so many winners in the top of the mountain, and I seen so many talented kids that they could not get opportunity, and they are there somewhere in Africa, riding in Rabat, somewhere like in different lives. I saw that with huge talent, huge number. And I know what it looks like the number, what it looks like, how to go fast in the climb as a rider. And I saw Eurocentric with my teammates, with other teammates. And I saw like in East Africa going some kids, how they go fast. And if they get opportunity, how they could achieve. And this is something that gives me energy that never happened. And what we're doing, and it's going to happen, full African team to take to the highest level. And with this all possibility and opportunity, it's not only like one big team, we're going to have also second team. And the more money we have, we could have also third team. We could go all the way down to 8, 14, 12 years old. And I really believe in that we are on the right track and we can have some special. And I mentioned earlier, the adaptation, all these things, forget about the story we bring behind it. Every story behind every athlete from East Africa, it's amazing. It's just people impressed by my story, but there is more stories that I'm impressed by in East Africa. And that is in our pocket just there, like we try to bring with just also winning races. So I think this is never happened and it's coming.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned, obviously there's an untapped potential that you are with Team Amani trying to tap into with the new UCI continental team, the development squads, and then obviously you have further development with young kids. And with the fact that European kind of cycling being European centric, and you are trying to decentralize that by creating one day UCI gravel races, having the migration gravel race. There is kind of you're trying to level out the playing field, bringing young athletes, reaching out to that untapped potential, removing those barriers specifically in East Africa. And I mean, but there still remains a problem, which is the structural kind of hierarchy, if you will, of cycling racing, cycling organizations, government bodies. In your opinion, both of you, what do you believe the sport must do to change, to have a true global integration where you see, as Tsgabu just mentioned, about those stories, you are just one of millions of stories that could be untapped from East Africa, from the continent itself. What for you are the key things that structurally needs to change? I mentioned just a few of that you already started doing yourselves, but kind of broadly speaking, what's your take on that?
Yeah, can I ask you a question just there, like to after we start with the question?
Yeah.
Sir. So the running, when you see marathon runners or long distance runners, all the events happening, like, what do you think about this sport? Do you think it's a European sport or Western sport or African? What do you think in running?
So you're talking about sort of running as a sport, or marathon running, long distance running?
Because distance running, because you mentioned it, cycling is dominated by European. It's a European sport, and I just want to ask you what.
Yeah. So it's a very good question. So for long distance running, endurance running, I still see it, and I probably this answer will come with a bias, which is I still see it as European centric, but Kenyan athletes, African athletes are dominant now, but I still see it as predominantly a sport that is dominated by the West. So that's my answer, but I might be biased.
Yeah, so we're not gonna go deeply there. We can end up in different conversation, but I think when you go back in time before 1960, there was no athlete who could win in marathon or long distance marathon before Abdul Bekela. There was some few just participating, but nobody winning. And when you see now, like you said, dominated by so many East African that they could win, and it's like no close, like top 20 is all of them. It's stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's a long term, it's coming. And before 1950, 1960, nobody expected it's going to happen like this. And with cycling, I could tell you, I would love to invite people to come to Eton where we stay, see what we're doing. It's in that part, 1960 part, that will change. That is something that is special as a Team Amani we try to do. I could see it in 20 years, 10 years, 15 years, really long, that I could see that process from my side, from project prescriptive, like we always going, we have a goal, we have a dream, we have 2 years, 6 years, 10 years plan. We have always a plan about that. But as a person, I always think about even kids didn't even born, what we have to do a setup with Team Amani just to be changed and up there, like what is happening in the running to be up there, because there is nothing is missing now. We have in this beautiful time, like everything is available. If you have good within the team, and we could have all the best coaches, the best technologies, the best everything, and what helps you to achieve what we want to achieve is the talent, and the talent is there. So it's just to answer on that. I think it's all about timing, and we are that in changing, and you will see more, I think, in 10 years and more.
It's before I go to Michael, it's a good point, Mikel. Sorry, before I go to Mikel, it's a good point because it's And I don't want to. I'm going to inevitably. I'm going to butcher what Mikel has said in a previous interview, but that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mikel. Is that in the past you said people need to ditch this view of 1980s Africa with wars and famine ravaging the continent, and need to see what's happening right now, where there's wealth, there's a lot of development, people wanting to take up cycling, and it kind of it just goes to show that there needs as well to be a shift in mentality from because the as you mentioned, Tsgabu, the vision is there, the plan is in place, and with the current access to technology, it's easier than ever, I guess, to sort of spot talent, to spot and to have allow people to have the right resources to level out the playing field and kind of bring these new voices, bring these new kind of narrative to the cycling world.
Yeah, for me, look, the only thing we ask for people who are even mildly curious in what we're doing is for a bit of nuance in terms of their approach to the continent. So, for example, I could say that Europe is a place of war and very unstable due to the conflict in Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
But then you might say back to me, but Ukraine is over here, and what about France, and what about Germany? Those places are historically stable. I could say the same thing about East Africa. I can say, yes, indeed, there is instability in Democratic Republic of Congo, but in Kenya, it's quite stable and has been historically. And so that's the kind of subtle nuance that I think is fair to ask for when we're talking about what our ambitions are in the region. As far as like development of the sport and some of the structural changes, we're not asking the sport to change. I think you ask an institution that's been around for as long as cycling to change on its own, and you are just screaming in the desert. I don't think there's anyone within the powers that be that see an issue with it being a regional endeavor, because they have their traditions. They're all quite beautiful traditions we all love, but they're interested in sort of replicating that system, right? Because that's a system,
yeah, of course,
that has made cycling what it is. For the rest of us, though, who want to see more access, it's really on us to kind of make the case, make the case for what cycling could actually look like if there were more people playing it, and if they were playing it in different places. So for us, the biggest structural challenge fundamentally is access to racing opportunities. So, this is where I think being a student of what has taken place before and what has been tried before on the experimental level is really important for our project. Just to give you an example, we just did the Tour of Rwanda last week. Both Tsgabu and I. Tsgabu was the DS for the team. And what you would see in that tour is that there were, a hell of a lot of Africans, East Africans, who, were competing for the overall. The difference, though, is that, the European teams that were there, they're probably already racing this week, right? They left Rwanda and now they've gone to their next race. All of the East African athletes who were competing against them may be sitting on their hands until the World Championships. So actually, we have a big problem here. The answer historically has been, well, let's just take the top performer, singular, and send them, for a month in France. And you think, well, one, does that put that athlete at the same level as the Belgian kid? Who, can race weekend and week out, go back home to mom, eat mom's cooking, and then go back again and fail and fail and fail and fail. Whereas the one kid who did the best in one race gets another pressure-packed audition for 1 or 2 races where he's clearly set up to fail, because cycling in general is 99% failure.
Yeah, of course.
The
Yeah.
difference is that when this kid fails, everybody in the peloton goes, "See, I told you this is bullshit. Send him home." You know?
Right.
And so, yeah, we don't expect that, people, if they just watch this podcast, that somehow they're going to give that kid another chance or let him fail more often. That's not going to happen. What needs to happen, and this is what we're interested in, is creating a circuit outside of the European circuit, a racing circuit that is acceptable to African athletes, with all of the visa restrictions, without all of the drama that comes with traveling abroad as an African, and let that circuit, just like it is in football, let it be professionalized, let it have African sponsors, and there, then we have the cream of the crop who rises out of this circuit will be the ones who will take on Europe successfully. But I think ultimately, like, just sending a few of the best to go into Europe and see how they fare, that system is from a structural perspective. And don't talk to me about Gideon, because like 1 in a billion are not odds that we want to bank on. That's not how you change things structurally, by having one athlete out of a billion make it through.
Yeah. So with that, with the creating more opportunities in Africa, so can you kind of elaborate on that? What I know, I've seen on your Instagram page, Team Amani Instagram page, kind of the race calendar for your new UCI Continental team. So just talk me through that, or both of you talk me through that program. That, from what I've seen, is mainly focused on racing races within the continent. That is from what you just said, that's the goal, to create create as many race opportunities for your athletes as possible within the continent. Is there a goal to organize more races, or just give more and more exposure to the cyclists, to the athletes in Team Amani?
I'll start on this one. I mean, I think we've organized as many races as we can, to be honest, to show that in fact it's possible, and that they can be financed by the African corporations, to underscore the point that there in fact is quite a lot of money in Africa, despite what people in Europe may think. So it's possible, and we're doing it. We're doing it in Kenya, but obviously it has a ceiling if we're organizing it ourselves.
Of course.
And so really what we want to do this season is demonstrate that in fact there is a lot of races in Africa that have been around for quite a while, that are super exciting, that you may not have seen, and we're going to take you there. We're going to show you what it looks like to race in Mauritius, a beautiful island paradise. We'll show you, besides what you may have seen in print media about Rwanda or about Lunsar or about Cameroon, places you may not be able to pick out on a map, but that doesn't mean that there aren't hundreds of thousands of people on the side of the road screaming for a cycling race, And, why not, I don't know about, the fans who are watching this podcast, but like, quite often in the spring, we've gone on our bike ride, and we've got our legs up, and we're watching, yet another race in Belgium, which are all very exciting, and I'm a huge fan as well. But like, imagine if you could split screen it, and then watch, what's happening, in Belgium, and then at the same time watching, something equally exciting with new protagonists with a different venue, happening somewhere else on the continent, somewhere else in the world, and I think that is the promise of opening the sport up. There are new markets, there are new fans, there are new, potential landmark events. So until people go out and see it, I think this all kind of exists, but but with the larger cycling world not taking note.
Mm-hmm.
I think just to add to that also, like what Michael said is, beside that, what we try to do also, because it's part of our big plan, is always small races support with whatever we can. It could be with media, it could be with the money, but all the small races we have around East Africa, we always behind it. And Michael been traveling to all the countries, meet the federation, for example, with Ethiopia. I'm not sure if you Tour of Tigray on YouTube channel. I would love people to suggest to watch that race, what we try to do. And also at this moment where we're doing this interview, our team is in Tour of Tigray racing women team. And people, you will see the video when it comes. People doesn't think what is going on, what is we are working behind the scene, because there is happening just women tour for 5 days now. And we are part of it and supporting with whatever we can at this moment. And because we believe that takes us to this biggest level. Like you mentioned, there is so many races, but it's happening. It's on the ground. As a federation, there is people doing it, and we are part of supporting with what we can. And we will need to add more races, and people doesn't see it is like, for example, where I come from, or Binyam, or all the Eritreans where they come from, also from Rwanda. There is always organization behind it. You cannot come like show up to the World Tour without any foundation. People sometimes forget that. And there's a lot of foundation that when we said we have this dream, 10 years plan, because there is also foundation, people don't see it. And we just, that's us energy, why we try to create this dream, and it's possible because I come through that process. And it's funny. When I was in the World Tour, journalists asking me like, how you train? Like, do you have asphalt? Of course I have. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, it's just stupid. It doesn't make me angry. It makes me laugh because people think just like only cycling is for the Europeans, but it's not. There is a foundation on the ground. What I want to say, it just gives us acceleration to where we want to get. It's not just we try just like, okay, it's happening, and but it's also the gravel thing for us. It's a big thing where we come from, and we are working, because most of the talent identification race we can try is like expand a lot of gravel races, and that's also in our package. Try to add with whatever we can, because gravel is beautiful thing. Is like you could do with any city bike. Some kid could come like with any city bike, could participate. It doesn't have to have aero road bike. So we have our big work on that. Like our main core is gravel. That where we come from, we know this, but we take it pause to put all this to connect together. That's why it's like someone is doesn't think what's going on behind, what's our plan and everything. Because it's when you look back, like for me, 5-10 years, I will never think this is gonna happen in East Africa, like what Team Amani is doing, to tell you honestly. And now we like putting all together, different discipline, skill, the point behind it, what we do with small group of people. It's impressive. That is just something I wanna just to add, because there is a lot happening beside we try to achieve to get where we want to get. Because he mentioned a little bit about Binyam. Binyam doesn't come like just overnight to win it. It's we passed so many sacrifices. Myself, Daniel Teklaimanot, people doesn't know what it looks like 2011 for me when I said I want to do Tour de France. That was far for many people. And that challenge, I know it by myself because I go past through it. And that takes me 5 years to achieve it. But it was really, nobody see it. It's going to come. And Binyam come to win it. I saw that, believe or not. It's possible, because someone will come to chase it to doing more. And I see that also with Team Amani. That's also our big energy. We could do a lot of things in the future, because I come all the way the process, and I come back there thanks to the Team Amani organization, because I just meet in the middle to have we accelerate more, and there will be people also coming in for sure. You will see, because it's just what we're doing. It speaks by itself, So I want to add a little bit to what he said. There's a lot of races we support and all those things. It's just not small things and one thing, just only the dream. There's big puzzle that we try to put all together, because that's very important for us. And also with the federations, what they do in their house, in their home, the races is part of part of our project just to accelerate to where we go.
Yeah, I completely understand. It's building the foundation, building the blueprint, supporting the different organizational bodies, because you have young kids. If they see the athletes with coming back to their homes, and telling their stories, what happened, and then seeing that there is a potential within cycling, and then they can see that there is races being, there is development squads, and that, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, is like having a pathway that you can clearly see that you can get there, you can achieve that. It's not, as you mentioned, Tsgabu, things don't just happen overnight. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes, as again Mikel mentioned as well. And I think this is also what you're doing. The Team Amani is very interesting and very pertinent, because you are shifting the narrative. If a cycling fan is not, is mostly perhaps focused on what European media is saying, and what you're doing, yes, it's making a lot of waves. It's changing how the cycling teams are growing, races are being organized, and what you're doing with the way you create, you tell the stories. And this is what is important, because you need to have the story. You need to showcase to to myself, or living in Europe, that what is happening there is real. It's happening, is making change, is actively changing people's lives and creating a pathway to success. And having athletes coming to Europe, coming to the US, creates that link. People see you, and then they want to understand, okay, well, hold on, where are they coming from? And then and then through your social media, through the appearances on the media that you have, people start making those connections, starting putting the story together. And that's, I think, having that kind of key focus on your strategy of, let's be present in the media, let's be vocal about what we're doing, and try to be, try to tell our story in as many places as possible, so that everyone sees what is happening. Because, to the point that Mikel said, if you're shouting in the desert, yes, you are shouting, but no one is listening to you. So you need to be in the right places. And I guess that comes to the point of, where we are now. You came to my podcast, and I am just one of hundreds of podcasts that you will be going to. And that is part of your plan, is showcasing what the work that you're doing, building the foundations to what you want to achieve down the line. And I think that's, and I wanted to kind of as well bring an interesting kind of element to your story, because a lot of the media focuses on the athletes, on the that reach the pinnacle of the sport, the 0.1%, that get to the Tour de France and get to race it, get to race unbound gravel, for instance. And I'm interested from your perspective, is there any kind of story that you have seen and evolve, develop at the grassroots level, from the kids that you are helping to bring to cycling and grow and develop through your talent ID program? Is there something that like an athlete, a kid that you think is making is going to make a jump in 5 years' time to be that 0.1%, to be that athlete that I or someone else is going to be thinking that woman, that man is going to be at the top of the podium at the Tour de France, for instance.
Pedro, how much time do you have, bro?
Well,
Yeah, so many stories like that. I mean, I could think of, the one that's at the forefront of my mind at the moment is, what's happening right now in the Tour of Tigray, the women's race. I mean, I think speaking about a grassroots miracle, where your listeners may be forgiven for not knowing that just 2.5 years ago, there was a brutal civil war in Ethiopia that claimed 200,000 lives. Countless women, particularly from Tigray, were subjected to sexual violence. And 2 years later, we're having a bike race. We're having a women's bike race with a really competitive field, passing burnt out tanks. And the thing, a lot has been made about and spoken about, the physiological advantages that potentially East African athletes may have vis-a-vis their, international counterparts. But I'm not persuaded that is their superpower. For me, the superpower is psychological. And I come across this in my day job as well. The fact that these people from this region have endured what they endured and continue to persevere, continue to press on. It's a marvel that I've been very fortunate to experience. It's the wind in my sails, to be honest. It's the thing that makes me think that we human beings, we can endure and we can handle more than we think we can. And these athletes are a testament to that. The federation in Ethiopia, the federation in Tigray, what they have done to marshal the resources to bring cycling back when they have people who are still sitting in IDP camps. I mean, it's amazing. And then to see the level of, this isn't, again, like some kind of UNICEF story. This is a sports story. And they see sport as a way to project that, yes, they bent, but they didn't break, and that's just in Ethiopia. We have,
of course.
We have athletes. I have an athlete from a warrior tribe in Uganda, the Karamojong, who, was an orphan. She was an orphan at an early age, had a younger sister, and, got on a bus by herself when she was 7 years old into the capital city to go out and make money to put food on the table for her younger sister. We have people in Rwanda from, both the Hutu and Tutsi tribes that, race together. We have groups that have historically, from Rwanda and Congo on the same team. Despite the fact that, the adults are arguing and fighting and killing each other over resources, the athletes, they come together for common cause. There are so many stories like this, that's why I asked you how much time you have, and we're just scratching the surface. So, I mean, I think, there has been much written about, the heroes of cycling, but there are so many more potential heroes. And sports, one of these great vehicles, that
of course
demonstrate that, in fact, through competition, we can push ourselves forward, and it doesn't have to be at the cost of human life.
Of course.
Just what to that, like more story is a little bit, it's because it's a really good story that to add also what he said, Michael, about we have a kid in Team Amani. We take him from Tour of Tigray. He was a winner of Tour of Tigray, Amani El Desta, and he was in Tour of Rwanda with us. And 2 years ago, he was in the field as one of the soldiers. He was fighting in the bush. He had a gun fighting against the enemy thing. And 2 years later, this year, he was in Tour of Rwanda. He finished 21 GC, and he was one of the strongest in the climbs. He was attacking stage 2, stage 3, the big riders that you have. They've been racing for the last 5 years. And what we do as a Team Amani, for me, when I think those kind of details, it gives me so much emotion and like so much strength, and really like we don't feel it sometimes, but we're doing, but it's just huge. When the story he was talking, I just remember this kid also. It comes to my head actually. 2 years ago, he was fighting, and now he has a bike. just racing
Yeah.
and seeing his dream to be the best athlete in the world. And as a Team Amani, we give him this opportunity. Otherwise, if he will not exist, look, this kid will be somewhere else, like, I don't know. But now we just having this chasing dream together with this kind of people. So it's just amazing. So I'm really proud to be part of this project, because it's just those kind of stories gives me energy as an athlete, as a person, as a where I come from and what I did. It means a lot.
Yeah.
And this is true story. It's just it's amazing. Sorry, just want to add to
Yeah.
that.
No, I mean, thanks for sharing, because it kind of speaks volumes as well to the work you're doing with Team Amani. And the fact that sport is able almost single-handedly to elevate an individual out of a catastrophic situation that you rightly said 2 years ago, coming from war, and kind of elevating themselves. But that speaks volumes to the work you're doing, because it allowed them to see that there is a way forward. You don't need to be. I don't want to diminish the kind of their. I don't know them personally, so I'm just speaking as from what you're telling me. But what I just want to stress is that the fact that the work you're doing just speaks volumes to the fact that you are enabling these people from in a short period of time to build a new life almost to what they previously could do. And I think that's, you mentioned, Mikel, you mentioned the mentality and the mindset that it speaks. And I think that's what sports enables people. It's just, if you see role models, if you see an academy, people are very easily able to shift their mindset, recognize this is my way out. And those kind of really sad stories of having a 7-year-old child having to get on a bus to provide food for our youngest sister, that it shouldn't be happening, but it's the consequence of war. And I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just saying that speaking to what you've built enables people to come out of those situations and build something for themselves new, and take them even further from in terms of professionally, in terms of what they can bring to themselves, what they can bring to their families as well. Because I think that's perhaps even a bigger part to play in the work you're doing, because these athletes that are part of Team Amani, for instance, they are seeing a path forward. They are getting into races. They are starting to see a new way of life, and then whatever wealth they are gaining from this, they are then passing it on to their families. So it's not just the one individual that you are changing, the life you're changing, but it's the whole community, it's the direct family, but also the communities around it that you are kind of building up. So I just wanted to, I think, to kind of underline that, because it shows that yes, it's the mentality and mindset that people really want to change themselves, and and that's what you're doing, is provides with a positive outlook to a future, to a brighter future. And I think one of the things I wanted to ask you, Mikel, first is, touching on this mentality and mindset aspect, is, as your role in a leadership position within Team Amani, how do you train your athletes? Because they clearly have the physical potential to compete at the highest level. And do you think, or do you need as well to kind of train them kind of within to adjust their mentality, their mindset, or do you think this is the fact that that they are so ready to grab onto this change, to grab onto this opportunity, that they will they morph into the role that they have to have, and they just grab it and are able to succeed easily?
It's a really good question, and unfortunately, the answer is complicated. Like I said, I think the mentality of athletes in the region is a kind of superpower. There are certain things that they don't come ready-made equipped with. For example, let's say that we have an athlete from Rwanda, and that athlete can climb with the best in the world, but that athlete also can't string a sentence in English together, right? Because he's never needed it before.
Yeah.
He speaks Rwandan. He speaks the language of his own country.
Of course.
But to proceed and to go out and compete in the world and market yourself and do all these things, to be able to go to the grocery store, to be able to open a bank account, to have a social media page, you have to communicate in a different language. Otherwise, athletes who you may be better than will get your opportunity, because a team will say, well, like for like, I'd rather have the kid who I can just put on a plane and can go anywhere. If I hire the Rwandan kid, I have to hire someone who can also travel with them and organize all these other things. So that's a huge limitation. And it's a small example, but there's a lot of little intangible things that I think our athletes don't necessarily come with, because they haven't needed those skills. They come from. And so we are, instead of just crying about it, we're just trying to do something about it. To be honest, we created what we call the Spoke Academy. We trialed and piloted this in Rwanda, and within 6 months, we had some athletes who weren't able to say anything become leaders on the team, because they saw very clearly that this was a hurdle. They took to that. They took to learning and grabbing that opportunity, just like they did, with their Training Peaks program. And the next thing you know, we have kids who are fluent in English within a year, and then really became leaders. They were the ones who were, taking all the other athletes and telling them how to get on the plane and, where to eat in Girona, and doing all of these things. So again, it's just, I think from our perspective, it's not about complaining about the world as it is. It's just about identifying problems and coming up with solutions that make sense for our athletes.
Very good. I mean, and Tsgabu, you had this experience yourself, and now you are a coach at Team Amani, and this mindset, but together with physical endurance, it's critical. Because you, at the top of this conversation, you mentioned about the shift that you had to have to adapt, and what is one of the key things that you as a coach is instilling into your athletes, into what is the kind of the right mental approach that you tell them that they need to have in order to succeed?
I think the main thing I'm working, and I will work always, is the hunger. It has to be more and more all the time, because once they try to create that energy, because they come already with some energy that they wanted so bad, like to be a cyclist, to be a winner, but I just need to accelerate that more to them. And I'm big fan of the running culture we have in East Africa. And sometimes I don't want to copy and paste from what World Tour teams doing, because I've been there. I know all the process, what's happening and everything, and how it goes with who, with which country, who's can adapt everything. I've been passed through that with my experience, and I still learning it, and I still have good friends that I haven't communicated, and I don't really copy and paste it to what we have and what we're working in the team, because we have this big culture like in running that sometimes I'm a big fan of, that you just prepare your athlete to win a race. You just need to make sure that you're doing the right thing with the process, with the development, with the training, aerodynamic, nutrition, all these things that has to go like on the shoulder of the coaches, which is including myself and the people we bring into the team. Then the athletes only focus just to win the race that we have in running, and that people doesn't realize, because the runners, they just do one thing. They do is they train, they eat, they drink, and they sleep, and they go to the race just to win, to achieve something. And that's why we have like nobody has in the world. No one big teams had a team house. I know that, in fact, that we have it this in Eton, that we build, we try to build this. So this is, for me, is like, it's all about bringing the winners with that hunger, just how you get more than the rest. We work behind you. So we try to bring something different, only works for us in East Africa, and you bring them to the biggest race in the world, that up there fighting with the winners. And to win that, there's a lot of things we have to get done as a coaches. So it's not easy what I said, but there is a big puzzle that we put together. But the main thing I'm working on is just pushing as athletes to get the hunger. And the other thing that we, with as a team, what we did is everyone to come to our team, he need to speak English, because the communication is key. And even we don't know, like in Ethiopia, Michael was there, we had a meeting, and we paid for the whole cyclist to learn in English. We paid for that. So it's like, we don't know how many riders we're going to get from there, but we just paid for the whole athletes. There are more than, like, close to 100 athletes that we have on the ground, and we pay for their language to learn English, because when they come with English, the communication is easier than what I'm saying you now. It's we communicate. I could make big progress, because if the communication is far, then they don't understand what I say. It's like, it's a key, it's part of it. So we work on that also. Like, everyone has to speak English at least in 6 months, and we don't wait. Like, we don't expect someone to come and learn in a month. It doesn't work like that. And so we give time to it, and like we really focus on that also. It's our biggest priority. So I think it's this is what I'm working, and I will do that. I want to do it from my side. I have this opinion. We have to do it in East African way, and it's different mentality. Because when I meet my athletes, I'm really interesting to hear their background, where they come from, how they grow up, how was their work school, everything, because it connected for me where they're gonna go. Always, with whoever they are strong. So it's just different compared to what other big teams doing, to what we're doing on the ground.
Yeah. I mean, he also, there's a few things, I mean, that both of you said. I mean, one of is the communication barrier. That's a key aspect that you are addressing. And the fact that just teaching however many people to learn English as a second language, even if they don't make the teams, I mean, that in itself is already setting them up for better outcomes in life, regardless of whether they even going to go ride a bike. So that's already a massive plus. And the other aspect is kind of from a mindset perspective, is that understanding, so much of our inner motivation, so much of our hunger to succeed is based on how we grew up, our background, how our, the social economical factors, and that, understanding that essence, where the roots of where that person came from. And as a coach, I'm not a coach, but, having that process enables kind of a coach to tap into that kind of that raw emotion, if you will, of wanting to, whether that is step out of poverty, whether it is providing a house for your family, whether that is growing, being a successful athlete. That is, tapping into that raw emotion of is, I guess, it's what it is the key to a successful career. And I think that applies to to any person. That you have, without generalizing too much, a lot of success stories come from people wanting to prove something or someone wrong, something that, whether it is the context where they grew up in, whether it is a family member, whether it is a group of friends, and kind of that raw belief, that instinct is deeply rooted in themselves, and that is based around the experience they had, the people that they're in touch with, and that can be directly related to the impactful to that. Sorry, what I wanted to say is that can be something was caused by nothing that they have complete interaction with. It can be a war, can be the family situation. So to go a long way around, but is to say, that tapping into the raw belief, touching into that hunger and that emotion is, as most often than not, what determines whether a person is going to be successful at running a business, whether it is becoming a professional athlete. And I think it's determinant of how having that. Sorry, what I wanted to say is that that is in itself is a determinant of what you can become. It doesn't mean that you're going to get there, but there is already kind of the determination and the hunger to succeed. And I think, you have, you mentioned as well the team house that you have, and that in essence helps to create a cohesive environment and helps the athletes to be together and train together, and that kind of nourishes as well that growth even more. And with this, having a team house, organizing as many races as you can, as you mentioned earlier on, there are, the funds are not unlimited. You have financial barriers, and that's something that I'm guessing you have to deal on a daily basis, because part of starting something from the ground up, you have and need quite a lot of investment, from brands, organizations, and I'm kind of from kind of in a scenario, and in a moonshot scenario, if you had unlimited budget, what was the first thing, or what would be the first thing that you would change, within Team Amani, within the cycling ecosystem, for Team Amani to grow? And also another layer to that is, something that it's always has been always kind of present in the cycling Eurocentric vision and legacy, which is the lack of diversity and inclusivity. So I'm just interested to see what is that? What could that look like if you had unlimited budget?
We were smiling at each other because we put this challenge to ourselves 6 months ago. Tsgabu and I and a few others on the team. It was exactly the same thought experiment. Because when we set out in the beginning, and at the time it was Sule Kangangi and myself. A lot of the things that we wanted to do was more or less demonstrate that, in fact, there were athletes who were deserving of opportunities, and there's something to see here. And I think without patting ourselves on the back, I think on some level we kind of achieved that. So I put it to Tsgabu, like, what now? If we, and let's not be constrained by the world as it is. Let's imagine a world as we want it to be, and then let's try and manifest it. And so, yeah, we had a lot of ideas, and it was very exciting. And we had a long list, and then a short list, and then now a strategy. And we've touched on a lot of it already. Like, I think obviously our goal is in the next 2 Olympic cycles to have a separate African cycling circuit that is sustained by African corporate sponsors. That in and of itself, so those races being more stable will result in an indigenous cycling ecosystem in each of those countries. So, for example, if you have like the Tour of Cameroon, and people care about the Tour of Cameroon, and because they care about it, there are commercial interests for, let's say, a Bank of Cameroon to sponsor it for 3 years. And if there is a 3-year commitment to the Tour of Cameroon continuing on, then if you are a team who wants to pursue a pro-continental license at the UCI, you can go to sponsors and say, well, I will definitely be at the Tour of Cameroon for the next 3 years. And then you, corporate sponsor, will get return on investment because it's televised, etc. If that happens across every country that we work in, suddenly we have 54 teams in which we can field athletes, and potentially 54 races, which, becomes something more like a circuit. And there, the pool of athletes that we can draw on will be much greater, and therefore so will our level of, or our ability to compete. So I think that's one of the big things. That the next thing, of course, is with that super team, we want to take on the world. We want to be the best team in Africa, and then we want to be the best team in Asia, and then we want to be the best team in Europe. We want to do it in a way that suits us, in a way that hasn't been done before. We want to create an environment that allows athletes, particularly from the continent, to feel comfortable. That sees them where they are, can understand things that maybe others wouldn't understand about their contextual circumstances. And we think all of these things will be marginal gains that have historically held athletes back. But in our environment, with our coaching staff, with our support staff, who also come from the region, be able to get the most out of these athletes, and therefore enable them to compete on a level they haven't previously done. So that's where we're going. And we say that with all humility. We know the challenge that's before us, but I think Tsgabu's story is one where nobody, I think, would have guessed that a kid from Tigray would be racing in the Tour de France until, and I think maybe Tsgabu, you can say you would have heard at nearly every stop that this is where the train ends. Thanks for playing. And because he's such a stubborn bastard, he just didn't agree. And so we're riding that mental strength and trying to convince the athletes the same, despite what the world tells you. There is a future here, but we all. It doesn't matter if they believe it. We believe it, and when we believe it, and if we keep pushing the way that we want to go, because we think that there is integrity in our pursuit and in our path, we'll just bend the world to our will in that way, and that's more or less what we're aiming at.
It's very clear where you are heading, and having that clarity is what will help you kind of steer the ship, if you will, for the metaphor, for the sake of the metaphor, in the right direction. With a lot of things inevitably, funding it can ebb and flow, and that's true to cycling as a sport. And I think that having that clarity where you're going, it's where you're going to steer. You're going to be able to steer the ship in the right direction.
Well, I think ultimately, Pedro, the story has to be accessible. It has to be accessible to a wider audience than just the converted. We want this to be a sporting story. We want it to be one where people want to see how it ends. People feel vested in its success. And again, not just people from East Africa. right? Like
Mhm.
I think anybody who cares about this sport can find a place in this movement, can find a place in the coalition that we're trying to build. And that's what we're trying to invite. And that's why we do the podcast. And that's why we're talking as often as we do about, the things that you may not understand or see in East
Of
Africa.
course.
There's,
Yeah.
we have guys, artists from the region who are responsible for our socials, who are also exposing people to the amazing, musical and, design culture of the region. Things that you just like, the harder you look, the more you scratch the surface, the more you'll find. And if we can get more and more people interested in this, the commercial aspects about what we're doing, the case for them is so much easier to make,
Mm.
When the coalition is broader, the easier it is for us to say, look who's with us,
Yeah.
You come behind this and your brand is represented in a project that's super aspirational, that's realistic as well, where this isn't made from pixie dust, and we don't pretend that it is. But yeah, I mean, imagine if we achieve what we achieve, then you will be part of it from the beginning, and then that arc is also your arc. Those wins, success is also your success, and we want that. We really want that from the grassroots up, from a fan perspective, all the way to the corporate engagement.
Yeah.
And yeah, if we build that coalition, we'll get there.
I mean, yeah, that is so true. I mean, you have, I mean, the stories that you showed at the grassroots, the example of the athletes that are now racing and at highest level in the African continent. And only a few years back, they were in a very different circumstance in their lives. I mean, those stories, that's why I asked that question, because those are the stories that in kind of, well, it do inspire. It creates an element of the change they are making. Puts a person, puts a name to the story that you to the people that you're changing their lives, and that's what resonates, I think, for me, and I think it resonates as well with many other people, because you and that's a kind of a, when you look at other sports, having that athlete, that, or having media following that athlete and seeing how that progress grows upwards, and then whether it is football, whether it is basketball, it's educating the public at large, the people that are interested in cycling and see that story, whether they watch it on social media, YouTube, as a race is unfolding, and they know where they come from. And that's so key, because if to the point of Tsgabu mentioned, is not there's a lot of groundwork being built, but all of that work needs to come. The narrative needs to be created to educate people, and that's exactly what you're doing. And the fact that you already have a lot of brands supporting you and kind of, if you will, kind of making their stand known. We are behind this project, and that creates change. That creates a movement towards people start noticing, brands, investment start noticing, and the way you're telling the story also enables future investment, future brands, corporations, and so on, to know they have come from this. They are changing the lives of people. The kind of the clarity of your objectives enables people to see where you're going with it. And the point with this is that you need to kind of repeat several times, because in the current world, where the attention is so fickle, these needs to be told and told again and again, so it starts being part of kind of day-to-day dialogue.
It's such a good point, Pedro. And I think honestly, we haven't really seen this in cycling in the past. This kind of Patagonia, where consumers basically support brands that reflect their social values. And we're really trying to invite people to do that in cycling because, there are a number of brands who have supported us from the beginning when we have very little to show for it because they believed in the promise of a more internationalized sport. And I think honestly, when people send us messages and stuff about how they can support, they're inspired by what we're trying to do. Like this is how you do it, get behind the brands that are actually, interested in making the sport more accessible internationally. We're trying to grow it into a more international sport. You have a choice to make about the kind of clothes that you wear, the helmet that you wear, the bike, the component parts, all of the things that these companies who are going out and doing this stuff when they don't have to, I think that is the power of the consumer here. Let our fans be a little bit more proactive about, the choices they make, because then again, it makes the business case for supporting us and giving us the time we need to do what we're trying to do that much easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true. I wanted to kind of bridge, create a little a bridge here, into kind of more from a personal side, because I think we have been talking at length about the purpose and ambition and the clarity that you have about Team Amani and the project that you're doing, and the success you have had already. And I'm also interested, and this is one of the purposes of the podcast, is also delving into the stories and the purpose of the people that make up the businesses, make up the cycling teams, change makers, really. And to both of you, has there been, looking back, has there been a kind of a routine or a kind of something that you have developed over the years through your professional athlete careers that enable you to transform your approach to how you see the world, how you see the work you do currently?
I mean, yeah, for me, there's so many things that I passed through, and there's a lot of experience I had that I always give a time to take it and use it, especially what I could do in the future. I said to people that are close to me and also on the riders, I had a presentation in November. The biggest inspiration person in the world, it is myself, the young Tsgabu. And I mean, like, because I learned a lot from that young kid, his decision, his drive, his, like, when everyone said him, it's impossible, and laughing at him, like when he said he wanted to do Tour de France, because they were right. It was far. Nobody see it. No one did it. Not even like someone who's in a Conti team, but just dreaming to go on the World Tour and like do Tour de France and all these things. What I passed through and all these strengths I always get from that and using it to do more, and gives me that energy that I don't want to lose that energy, because with the knowledge I have from all the experience, I know what I could do in the future, but I don't want to lose that drive and that hunger, that kid that could dream big. And I think there is a lot of things that I could bring and apply, because I'm still always speaking with myself. I have always good conversation what I could do in the future and apply to the kids. And also one thing, I think your audience maybe have to know also yourself that I'm still a rider. I'm still racing in gravel. So I have a lot to achieve and to do new things for myself, and I'm still hungry. But also working with the team, with the management, with the riders, and this gives me energy, because I know soon as the day I stop riding a bike and full time working within the team with whatever position I will get is I know that I will make the biggest damage with a good way to step up with the team to the next. And I know that Mike sees that, and also myself, I'm really keen for that process, but so far I think it's all the failing. It's a biggest success for us because we learn from it, and also all the process we saw what we're doing. Also, it's a good. It gives us energy, and I don't see it. I always focus on what we could achieve and what is failing. Those things is very important for me because I wanted to have that challenge now instead of after, and we passed through it. Not myself, with all of us. So I think there is so many things I could talk with different pointers, but I think I hope I answered your question because there's so much things coming, and that's always I bring it from my experience, and you could see what it could come. And I want to speak with action, just what Team Amani will do in the future. Like you could see it in the process, like what we're doing. It's for me, it's like after Trophy Rwanda, it gives me so much energy. I was like in the plane, I was thinking, it's our riders coming from gravel, and it's first time, and how aggressive they were until the last day. It's impressive. It scares me where we're going in the next 2 years. Trust me. How we start. It's our first race, and we were up there just like attacking, and it just that tells something to people who really know cycling. Like those kids, they don't come from road, and they didn't even had a race before, and this is what we're doing, and I wanted to speak with the world that with what we're doing, totally honestly, and that's the biggest one.
Very good. What about you, Mikel?
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, it's and this is something that Tsgabu would have heard me say probably 100 times. But one of the things that I think is critical and part of the culture that we're trying to instill in our team is one of continuous development. We try to kind of undermine the idea that if anyone thinks that they're good enough, myself included, myself especially, you have another thing coming, you know? We are not nearly where we want to be, not only as a project, not only with our personal ambitions, but just as human beings, you know? Like I said it as a kind of mantra for myself in the morning, and it's what I think about when I go to bed. Like, did I use this day to make myself better? Not only to make myself more marketable or anything like that, but more just have I added any new skills to myself? Have I new insight into what I'm doing? Have I understood the problem a bit better? What can I do tomorrow to make sure that I'm as best equipped as possible to achieve the goals we've set out for ourselves? And that's what we're trying to do on the team. Like, I want every athlete to think, have a bit of confidence, have a bit of swagger, but also have the humility to understand that, you're here, but we need to get here. And once you're here, we need to get here. And never be satisfied, never be complacent. And if we have that drive and if we have that hunger, from, the soigneur to our best athlete to our DS to whoever, then I think, we'll be operating like a wolf pack, like a bunch of pirates, as I said at the Tour de France, people who are hungry, the appetite is insatiable, and we won't stop until we get to where we want to go.
I mean, so fascinating. It's, both of you, what you said, it's well, the way I heard it, it's so very similar. It's that the drive to be constantly improving, constantly better. And I mean, to the point of Mikel, mentioning, that the most inspirational person is yourself as a child, as a youngster. That is so. That I wasn't expecting to hear that, but that reveals so much from your character. So, because having to create and forge a path ahead forward in your cycling career, and specifically for Tsgabu, that that motivation is kind of what still inspires you, what still drives you forward, and that's what you're instilling into your athletes. And to the same point with Mikel is that always wanting to be better, always, reaching the end of the day and recognizing and reflecting, what have I done today that allowed me to be better, a little bit better than the previous day? And that kind of, I think it's really creates a great synergy. And maybe that's why you are together, because it does work so well in putting a strategy, putting a project in place, and having it move forward. Because that's, with that mentality, with that purpose, it's not easy, but you have the right mindset. And I mean, with that, I wanted to kind of delve a bit more into the answers you just gave me, and try to understand, if there is anything, looking back, when you were, your in your teenage years, if you're looking back, if there is any, as you in your present age would give, what advice or would you give to that your younger self? Or it doesn't need to be advice, it could be just, say, words of encouragement or just something. If you kind of take yourselves back to that time, and with the perspective and the knowledge that you have now, what would you tell your younger self?
That's for me, this question?
For both of you, but yeah, go for it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, to be honestly, I had most of good things I always take, like I said, but one thing was I grow up with is, and everyone was telling me always, there's always more and you need to work hard always, which is true. And I was doing that. I always work hard. I was like, if it's something I see, like if it's beneficial, like I do it more always, because I had that drive. Just the more I do it, the better. And when I look back with the experience I get, I should have done more smarter with working hard. But that's also the life experience you get when you get older. You look back, actually, I should have been smart here. I should have do this. And in life, what I learned from that is, like, there's always something that you think today is the right thing. Like, the idea you have is the right, but in the future you think, it was wrong. Or it happened also the opposite side. You think this time is wrong, but after you go in the future, it's like, actually I was right there, but I was thinking. So you in life we have this kind of two things happen, and I was always chasing that you have to work hard, and I was always putting more, like training, putting more, and it makes me more fatigued, and I come to the race, I was over fatigued a little bit, and if I was like really smart, recover more, that I should have done more. So this kind of things I also do it now from all my mistakes to the riders I have now. I give this speech always, like, work hard and be smart. And there's so many mistakes I have done, and I still have them, and I really believe this. Like I maybe did, like, let's say 100 or 500 mistakes in my career because there was no one that's teaching me. Now my riders or our riders, I don't want them to pass through. I need to tell them that mistakes because they could have less mistakes. So like they accelerate more. So it's just something that I should have more smart with what I was doing. Everything was, and life is like that, I guess. You learn more.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, it's always great to have hindsight, because you know that there were things that could be done differently, but that's the way of life. Sometimes you don't have the right people around you. Sometimes you don't have the tools, and that's true for anyone. But there is, obviously, I will caveat that by saying that some people have more privileges than others. Some grow up with better advantages than others. So it's not a fair race by any means. So it's important to mention that, because not everyone has a equal start in life or has the same tools or resources available to them. What about you, Mikel? I'm interested as well to hear from your perspective.
Well, as you rightly point out, it's not for no reason that Tsgabu and I found each other. We have very similar outlooks, particularly about um, the the benefit of failure. And so, I wouldn't tell myself anything, right? I wouldn't want to avoid all the missteps that I took, right? All the misadventures, all the lefts when I should have gone right. I mean, because every one of them had a value. And they ended up, that process resulted in the person I am today. And had I not had those lessons, who knows, right? I think I look at them as a great privilege. Yeah, I mean, I think again it's more of a mindset, to look at adversity, to look at failure, to look at missteps as learning opportunities. We do this every time, like no matter what happens on our team, I'm always asking Tsgabu, well, let's make sure we get the most out of this, amazing learning opportunity. Yeah, it was a disaster, an absolute disaster. But let's not miss this, because in disaster is great opportunity.
Very good.
And a great growth opportunity for our team and for our athletes. So let's make the most of it.
Very good. I mean, yeah, it's one of these questions that it can present you with a curveball, and I think for a lot of people, that the process of the learning, the mistakes, the growing with it, that's what makes you. That's what makes who you are today. And yes, you could have changed a few things. You could have maybe have a bit more confidence or do something different. But in reality, I am where I am today because of my experience of going through a sinuous path. Both of you have your own experiences, and that's, you might have done a few things different, but where you are today is a product of where you've been. So it's an interesting question to ask, because it leads people to reflect in many different ways. And this also leads me on very nicely onto the question that I always ask my guests on the podcast. I guess perhaps encapsulates a little bit of your philosophy. And this is for both of you. What does success look like to you?
I mean, for me, the success is the process for what you do in whatever timing. And I'm a big fan of, like, for example, in my job is like the long-term athlete development. It's a big thing that to achieve, to get whatever you want. And that is the process brings you success. So if you do that, nailing that, like on the process of long term, you like what we talk, the failing is already success for us to get better. So I counted that. So it's those process is a success, and with that success, the outcome by itself it comes, because I wanna train my riders or help, or I do it with my kids, all these things. The success for me, or like I don't want someone to say me thank you or he helped me. No. I wanted to hear from your result. The result has to tell me thank you, or because I'm focusing on the process to get something outcome. So this is the way I think, and success for me is the process.
Yeah, I think for me, if we're talking kind of at a macro level in terms of this project, for me, it's all just about mainstreaming the notion of international participation in this sport. I would love there to be a time, in the not too distant future, where people just go, well, of course, there are athletes from East Africa in this game. What would cycling be without it? And what would cycling be without, the riders from Colombia and Ecuador? And where would it be without, sprinters from, Australia or Japan, whatever it is, or wherever they come from? I want that to be the norm. And I think it's just a matter of time, and I think we are the tip of the spear. I'd like for us to be the tip of the spear, but I want everyone else to come through once the door is pried open. So yeah, that's what success looks like for us, I think. And of course, what that looks like on the ground level and the areas that we operate. We think cycling is a beautiful sport, and I think it can enrich cultures and communities, and I think it can have multiple expressions and expressions we can't even anticipate. And that's the thing that I'm really excited about, right? Like, what does it look like? Full expression of cycling in Kenya. What does it look like in Ethiopia or Eritrea or Rwanda, Uganda? And it will be different with each country, just like it is in France. It's a bit different than it is, in the UK or Germany or anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, those are all things that we look forward to in this process.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, I am watching and I'm kind of rooting as well and doing my bit as well in my small way to contribute to your success. So I'm here to support what you're doing as well. And I wanted to kind of finish with a closing tradition where every guest gets asked a question that is left by my previous guests. And because I will do kind of two questions, one for Mikel, one for Tsgabu, two different questions, and I'll use two questions from two different guests, just because just to change it up a little bit. So who wants to take the first question?
Tsgabu does, of course.
Okay, right. Here we go. Okay, so Tsgabu. The question that was left for you is this: what is or was the toughest moment you had on a bike?
Toughest moment I have on the bike. I think I would say in the Tour de France, when I was racing, I had a big crash, really bad crash. I broke my two ribs, and so one of the goal was to do in Paris, to arrive in Paris and to finish that race. It was my first tour, tour, and yeah, I think that was. I remember I don't want to go to the hospital to check what it was broken. I know something is broken in my body, and yeah, I was just sleeping. When I breathing, I could feel it. Like I cannot breathe deep. I cannot break. I could have that pain. It's like every move I do, it goes to that pain, and I have to cancel from my head the pain with myself. And that was, I think, the process was hard in that 5 days. Then I remember the doctor said to me, the pain is getting better, like getting growing, and like, we don't stop you, we check you to see if it's broken or not, what happened in your body. And they found there was 2 ribs was broken, and that getting better because they were giving me anti-pain and all this stuff that was treated. So it was getting better. I was sleeping better. So yeah, that was the toughest. And I actually, when I look back, I'm proud of that. It gives me energy. So it's, but I remember the process.
Mm-hmm.
When you look back, when it passed, every pain you forget, every pain you forget. And yeah, but I look back sometimes to try to feel it, how much hard was, like, to sleep overnight, breathe, like speed pump, and like I was just against everything. What happened? Like, group was stop. I was like, I never complained, but I was complaining why they stop. It's because I was creating again and all this stuff. So when I look back to those old details, was one of the toughest day. In a few days.
I mean, that sounds pretty tough. That sounds pretty tough. Riding the 5 stages of Tour de France with 2 broken ribs. I mean, that's I can't begin to imagine what pain looks like. For whatever 5 hours a day plus recovery and all that. That is just, that puts in perspective what elite athletes like yourself, how it reveals a bit about how you compartmentalize the pain and the reward versus the the suffering, and it just, for someone like me, I don't, until I'm put in that position, I don't know what it looks like, what it feels like. But then your career path, I would argue that, to reach to that point in the Tour de France where you have 2 broken ribs and you have to ride 5 stages to get to Paris, that whole process, you have kind of, you have built up your pain threshold. You have built up your mental focus to that point where you crash, you are in an enormous amount of pain, and it's like, no, I'm not stopping here. This is not where it ends. And that requires so much, one, belief, kind of energy, mental energy, to overcome the pain. So it just,
And stubborn.
what I'm trying to say,
It's stubborn as well. This guy is stubborn, and that's why we're going to succeed ultimately.
Yeah, but not only. Honestly, I think there is in the ground kids like me. They could do more. Trust me. That's also just where we come from. There is so many kids like that. They could do it exactly what I do. I don't know where I asked.
Yeah.
I could not pick, but where I come from, trust me, there's so many kids. They can't pass.
Yeah.
Like they can laugh. They can have smile on their face. I was complaining, so there will be more kids. They could do it. I'm not really. I don't know. For you, maybe it's big, but for me, it was normal.
Well, yeah, because we can't compare each other, so that's why it's for you is very different than what it looks for me. So yeah, we can't compare each other. But we're yeah. So it's and now you're touching upon a point as well on what you have told yourself, your younger self, and that what you are now doing to the athletes in the Team Amani is that work smarter and harder. So you are that knowledge that you have gained through trial and failure, and now you're kind of streamlining those learnings so that the new generation, the new athletes coming through, are better prepared. So they will still have to deal with the pain, but they are better prepared to deal with it, if that makes sense. So, okay, so now, Mikel, this question is for you. This was left from another guest on the podcast. What are you doing to make the cycling industry at large a better place to work in?
A better place to work in. I don't know. That's a tough one, because I don't really see myself within the cycling industry because I have another job, and that thing that I still practice and that I'm still also equally committed to. So yeah, I'm not kind of someone within the industry, but I also think it gives us a unique platform to speak to the industry, because they don't put bread on my table. And also, maybe if you come as an outsider, you can more easily spot the things that are wrong with it. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to overstate our ability to move the needle with respect to the people who have been doing the same thing for 100 years and like the status quo. But I would like to think that on a certain level, we are trying to be as true to ourselves as possible. We're always talking about this. We're always acting on it. Like, this is where we come from. This is who we are. These are the things that are important to us. And there are no shortcuts about this, right? Like, if by bringing these people on or taking this shortcut, we can get to our goal faster, well, we may not do it, right?
Yeah.
Because the cost associated with it may actually be a diversion that take us to another path that we didn't want to go. And I would like to think, without being too abstract, that by being so resolute on sticking to our path, and that path also including, even though it's complicated, especially with resources, all of the women in our project, and making sure that they are coming with us, at the same pace, if not faster, than the men, even though that makes it more complicated, even though it means we're splitting resources, even though we have pressure from, certain, people who potentially could be partnering with us, that we should focus on one thing and not everything. Yeah. Just being stubborn, I guess, like, like we talked about it, and saying, well, no, that's not what our vision of success looks like. Our vision of success means we're all going together. And if it takes a bit longer, then so be it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is. I think there's more. What you're doing is very rightly said. You mentioned about moving the needle, and you are, because the work that you're doing showcases to the industry what is lacking, the opportunity that are lacking in terms of different athletes, different narratives coming through the sport, in terms of the sport in general being more inclusive, more diverse. So that I would argue that, even though, yes, cycling industry doesn't put bread on your table, to use your words, you are in reality making the changes. You are in reality showcasing what is possible, and people are taking notice of that, and brands are taking notice of that and are coming behind and supporting what you're doing. So that change that is happening is already creating ripples within the cycling industry. So that, I think, it is changing how we look at things. Is widening the discussion, is widening the narrative that's coming through the sport. So I think that is a critical aspect, that the conversation is being broadened.
It's nice to hear you say that, Pedro. But from our standpoint, we're just like, well, it's not where we need it to be, so we keep pushing. If others want to reflect on the progress that we may or may not have had, it's very nice to hear. But for us, we're not satisfied.
Very good. Well, and it shouldn't be. And it shouldn't be. That's
the kind
very good
that we try to maintain.
Very good. So, I mean, it's. I wanted to kind of, we have talked at length about, the Team Amani, your purpose, your ambitions, and I think, I speak for myself. I've come out of this conversation and I've learned more than what I knew beforehand. And I think if anyone listening to this episode comes away from it knowing more than they knew about not just Team Amani, but also the wider scope of what you're trying to achieve, it's a step in the right direction. And that's how you build these things. Is just every little step counts. And if you put it back to the marginal gains, every little percentage counts towards getting to the goal, getting to the final outcome of where you see Team Amani growing to. So I just wanted to say a massive thank you to both of you, to sharing your stories, to sharing the purpose that you have. And I'm really hoping that I can have you back in a podcast in 2 years' time, and you telling me, there has been a lot of changes that have happened since we came here in the first time, and this has been what happened for the better. So thank you again for your time.
We thank you, Pedro. I mean, I think it says a lot about who you are to have taken the time that you've taken to help us get this message out. We just need more people like you within the industry who are curious and open-minded, and can imagine a cycling world that is different than the one that they've seen so far. And so thank you for the platform, and we very much appreciate the time.
And that's a wrap on this incredible episode of Ride Success. Mikel and Tsgabu are proving that cycling's future isn't just in Europe, it's global. Their work with Team Amani is breaking down barriers, creating opportunities, and inspiring a new generation of African riders to chase their dreams. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow or subscribe to Ride to Success, so you never miss an inspiring story like this one. It would mean the world if you could also leave us a review. It helps more people discover the podcast and join the conversation. Until next time, keep riding and keep believing in the power of the bike.